If there had been an internet in the first century, there is little doubt that one of the most prolific and entertaining bloggers would have been a guy named Plutarch. Not only was he a prolific writer, producing around 200 works over his 73 years, but the stuff he wrote was more tabloid than highbrow. As well as being a writer, he was also a philosopher and a priest at the famed Temple of Delphi. Today, we get up close and personal with the life and works of Plutarch. Plutarch was born in 46 CE in the Greek town of Chaeronea. The village was located some 50 miles from the famous town of Delphi, where the oracle was consulted for her predictions of the future. Greece at the time was under Roman occupation. Even though a Roman conquest would historically involve removal of elements of native culture, the Romans were admirers of ancient Greek culture, and so Plutarch grew up in an environment where he was able to learn about and appreciate the past of his people. The family was relatively well off, with Plutarch's father being a biographer and philosopher, paving the way for his son to follow in his footsteps. They had quickly adapted to life under Roman rule and made important connections in political circles. The little that is known about Plutarch's life mostly comes from clues in his own writings. He enjoyed a life of privilege as a young man, being educated by some of the finest scholars in Greece. In his early 20s, he spent some time in Athens under the tutelage of the famous philosopher and mathematician Ammonius. From his essays, we know that he had at least two brothers, Timon and Laprius, and that he had a wife named Timoxena. A letter still exists written by Plutarch to Timoxena in which he consoles her over the death of their 2-year-old daughter, also named Timoxena. His writings reveal that he had at least 4 surviving sons and possibly a daughter named Polyaenus. Though he based himself in the town of his birth for almost his entire life, Plutarch was a frequent traveller. He roamed as far as Asia, Egypt and Italy. From around the age of 40, he served as one of the 2 priests at the Temple of Apollo, home of the Oracle of Delphi. In his role as priest, Plutarch served as an assistant to the high priestess of the Temple of Apollo, who was known as the Pythia or Oracle. One day per month, the priestess was consulted by a never-ending stream of people seeking knowledge of the future. In less settled times, the supplicants would include political and military leaders wanting to know the outcome of future battles. However, during Plutarch's decades of service, the queries were more mundane, with such matters as the weather and the likelihood of marital success being foremost on people's minds. According to Plutarch, however, the job of the oracle was extremely taxing. He likened it to running an endurance race and indicated that the life of the oracle was often cut short due to the strain of the office. As well as serving the oracle, Plutarch's duties as a priest included making sacrifices or organising the 4 yearly Pythian Games, which were held at Delphi. It's highly likely that he also participated in the secretive mystery rites associated with the ancient Greek religion. In addition to his duties as a priest to the oracle, Plutarch also served as a magistrate in his hometown of Chaeronea. This was one of the highest offices that a Greek citizen could hold under the Roman system, and it had afforded him great prestige and privilege. In his role as magistrate, he travelled overseas on several occasions to represent his municipality. He also served in the annual role as archon, or ruler, of his hometown on at least one occasion. His public duties also took him to Rome on numerous occasions. He is known to have made the acquaintance of at least 2 emperors, Trajan and Hadrian. According to 4th century historian Eusebius, Hadrian appointed Plutarch governor of Greece, but this claim is highly dubious. Unlike many other men in positions of local power, Plutarch did not isolate himself in privilege. On the contrary, he was known to involve himself in the most menial of jobs around his town. At some point in his adult life, Plutarch was granted Roman citizenship. At that point, he was given the Roman surname Mestrius, which no doubt came from his Roman sponsor, the consul Lysius Mestrius Florus. Roman citizenship afforded Plutarch many privileges. As well as being able to wear a toga, he was able to vote, run for office, enter into a legal contract, and he had the right to a trial if accused of a crime. There is no official record of the death of Plutarch, The general consensus among historians is that he died in 119 CE at the age of 73. Over those 7 decades, he achieved a massive output of literary works. The most famous was his Parallel Lives. In this work, he presented a series of paired biographies of a Greek and a Roman historical figure. This unique and innovative form of biography served many purposes. It presented the lives of their heroes to the Greek people in tandem with the Roman men of fame, showing that they had many similar qualities and trajectories. In doing so, it served to bring the two cultures closer together. But Parallel Lives did more than that. Rather than focusing on the dry facts of their lives, Plutarch gave attention to the motivations and thinking behind the actions of the subjects. In doing so, he brought these characters to life. As a result, his writing was lively, highly readable, and relatable to the everyday reader. Even reading it today, 2,000 years later, Parallel Lives makes for an easy read, unlike most other ancient texts. Parallel Lives includes 23 comparisons between Greek and Roman historical figures. His main object in these paired biographies was to both glorify the subject and to keep the reader entertained. Sometimes these goals were achieved at the expense of historical fact, but that did not bother him. In fact, he made a clear distinction between biography and history, with the former being looser with the facts than the latter. Modern historians, therefore, are cautious when it comes to many of the facts that Plutarch relates that are not corroborated by other sources. Even though he was known to sprinkle material to spice up his stories, Plutarch did conduct extensive research on the subjects of his mini-biographies. A key source for him was a Roman historian by the name of Pollio, who lived a generation before Plutarch. The second most famous of Plutarch's works was the Moralia, which translates to morals. This work is a collection of essays on ethical, religious, civil, and political issues. The essays were presented either as speeches or as discussions between individuals. Many of the topics that he wrote about would not be out of place on a modern blog aimed at the 21st century reader. Some of them were the ancient equivalent of who would win a battle between Batman and Superman. For instance, one of his topics was, which is more useful, fire or water? Another was, are land animals more intelligent than sea animals? In a series of essays, Plutarch delves into the teaching of the various philosophical schools which were prominent throughout the ancient world of his time. In these writings, he showed himself to be a follower of Plato, with some leanings towards Aristotelian teachings. He contended that the study of Aristotle should come before that of Plato, which refined and clarified it. Plutarch's essays on politics included such out-of-the-box topics as whether a man should engage in politics when old, a question which is extremely topical today, considering we have a succession of septuagenarians occupying the White House. As well as being hugely popular during his lifetime, the works of Plutarch have been hugely influential down through history. In the Greek-speaking eastern part of Europe, his works became required school texts, and he was quoted by many leading figures through the early and Middle Ages. His work saw a revival with the invention of the printing press and the Renaissance. They were hugely influential in the writings of William Shakespeare, being a key source for the great playwright's Roman histories. In our time, Plutarch's writings represent a highly accessible insight into the mind of a first-century man of influence. If you've never read any ancient writings, give one of Plutarch's essays a try. You'll be highly entertained, and who knows, you might just learn something. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. If you have any other suggestions for future topics you'd like us to cover, please leave a comment below, and we'll see you next time on History Junkie.